right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christine Hong. I think that most of you have stayed on from the early morning session. I'm the director of the Center for Racial Justice, and I really heartily welcome you to the second day of the CRJ Summer Institute. This is something that we hold every other year, and the theme for this year is localizing ethnic studies. And we have a really wonderful roundtable today. And this was paired with a fantastic presentation and workshop that was led by Alfonso Taboada earlier today. Yeah, it was so great. Yeah, thank you. And during that session, we actually began to make headway by thinking about and breaking out into smaller groups that were dedicated to thinking about how we could organize together to strengthen ethnic studies locally, and also what sort of curricular needs are there. And there's a lot of community input at that time too. So Alfonso, thank you so much for getting us started. And I wanted to say that in terms of the Summer Institute, today was really dedicated to trying to work through some of the impasses that we are confronted with. And that has been, as every single person who is to the left of me understands so well, ethnic studies far from a shoo-in because of the passage of AB 101 has emerged as a struggle throughout the state in different places, but one of the major front lines is actually Watsonville. And so what happened over the course of this past year is an organization formed. It's Pajaro Valley for Ethnic Studies and Justice. And this is a coalitional group, and there are many different organizations that are a part of it. I rather than go into all those details because I don't want to overlap with some of the content that will be presented, I just wanted to say that you're going to get in this roundtable a prismatic sense of the different dimensions of that struggle. I really hope that following that, we can bring to bear some of the earlier brainstorming we were doing together and to actually really apply that to the kinds of difficulties and challenges that we face locally. So what I would like to do is also just say this too. This is a group of people, and many of you who are in the audience are also part of this coalition that has really tirelessly been organizing. And in addition to doing things like having a town hall in Watsonville that drew about 100 people, we've also on a twice-a-month basis been going to the PVUSD meetings and speaking out. And many of you have participated in that. And there's actually a really amazing archive of materials that have emerged from our struggle, and that includes videos of people speaking out, including students who have been speaking out. And in some cases, students so sick and tired of addressing a board that doesn't even seem to be paying attention, that's looking down at their cell phones or having a sour scowl on their face as they're looking off in the distance. Some of the students have, in fact, taken to their microphone, but instead of speaking to it, they've turned around and they've spoken to the community. And so anyhow, I just want to give you a sense of the fact that this is, what you'll see here is a kind of cross-section of people who have been involved in this struggle. And one of the core groups in the struggle has been the Barraza family. And really, I would love for them to speak about their own journey to fighting, being on the front lines, fighting for ethnic studies. But I'd like to introduce first and foremost Lourdes Barraza, and I'll introduce in this sequence Lourdes was brought to the United States when she was a young kid. She grew up in Watsonville. Indeed, she's a daughter of a cannery striker, and she attended PVUSD schools for the entirety of her K through 12 education. She graduated from Watsonville High School in 1990, and when she graduated from college in 1994, she returned to Watsonville and she began working as a teacher for PVUSD. She taught for 10 years, and then she returned to college to complete her PhD in clinical psychology. After she graduated from graduate school, she once again returned to Watsonville in order to serve her community. Both of her children are now high school students. They've been leading voices in the struggle for ethnic studies. And they're students who, among many, many thousands of students in Watsonville, are in a very immediate way impacted by the decisions and the misleadership of the PVUSD school board. And next to her is her daughter, Ishel. Ishel was born in Santa Cruz but raised in Watsonville from the age of 3. She's been a student at PVUSD since she was in kindergarten, and she is an incoming freshman at PV High School. She will be taking ethnic studies, but I would argue that Ishel has been practicing ethnic studies all throughout. She's an artist who dances Mexican folklorico, and she's been attending school board meetings since she was in 8th grade. Every single time she shows up, and she does this because she wants her peers and for herself to have ethnic studies and ethnic studies that serves the community. To Ishel's right is her father, Gabriel Barraza. Gabe was born and raised in Southern California, and he graduated from UCLA with a degree in psychology. He started off his career working in the mental health field and moved to Santa Cruz County in 1996. He has been working in social services for the past 3 decades. He moved to Watsonville with his wife Lourdes and his 2 children, Maximiliano and Ishel, in 2013. Gabe's children are now both PVUSD high school students, and he really wants them to learn the authentic history and struggles of marginalized peoples. And this is the reason why he has joined the fight to bring back the community responsive education contract. To the right of Gabe is Maximiliano, who was born in Santa Cruz but moved to Watsonville when he was 4. He's been a student at PVUSD for the entirety of his K through 12 education thus far, and he's going to be a sophomore at PV High School. He took ethnic studies as a freshman, and he will be retaking it this upcoming year. He has firsthand experience of a curriculum that has been besmirched by people who don't have the courtesy or the decency to actually see for themselves what's occurring in the classroom. He's on the PV high basketball team, and he also dances Mexican folklorico. He became involved in the fight for the CRE contract because he wants to be taught ethnic studies that centers liberation, okay? Not some watered down version of ethnic studies that we're seeing all over the place. Okay, and Jo Holo received her bachelor's degree from the University of Chicago in chemistry and geophysical sciences, and she also received her master's degree at UC Santa Cruz in earth sciences. She's starting right now a teaching credential program in a Master's of Science Education at San Jose State with a focus on social justice and equity within STEM educational practices. She plans to become a fantastic, I can imagine, public high school teacher in the Bay Area as a queer Filipina Jew. Jo is an advocate for Palestinian liberation. She's an active member of both Santa Cruz Jews for a Free Palestine and Palestine Solidarity Central Coast. She is committed to intersectionality, abolition, and the liberation of all people from oppression. To Jo's right is Eli Davis. Eli is a CSU Monterey Bay student who's majoring in ethnic and gender studies. They are pursuing education to be of service in the mental health field, especially for low-income LGBTQ plus youth and young adults. Eli has been organizing within the LGBTQ plus community for years, specifically around creating spaces to meet the needs of folks who are not served by bars and nightlife, such as neurodivergent individuals and those who are in recovery. They have also been focused on building outdoor gatherings during the past 4 years of the pandemic, hosting an outdoor monthly queer sea shanty sing-along and afternoons at the archery range. Eli lives in Aptos and found out about the PVUSD ethnic studies decision in late October of last year after an assignment by one of their university professors asked students to attend or watch a city council or school board meeting. And this is really a testament. They have been attending school board meetings, every single last one of them, ever since. I also wanted to introduce to the right of Eli, Keiko Utsumi, who is actually an intern for the Center for Racial Justice and someone who I know to be an incredibly wise and seasoned organizer. They are a rising senior at UC Santa Cruz, and they are on their way to earning a degree in critical race and ethnic studies. They're born and raised in Los Angeles, and they hold their hometown community tight in their heart. And they study CRES with the goal of forwarding people-centered political education to guide and strengthen the building of community power in Los Angeles. Keiko follows the strong leadership of organizers in Anlacabayan, Santa Cruz, and this is a youth and student organization that is building the national democratic movement for a free Palestine. Philippines, excuse me. I have Palestine on the brain, yeah. They're also involved in the J-Town Action and in J-Town Action and Solidarity, and this is a grassroots mutual aid anti-gentrification political collective in LA's Little Tokyo. They are a poet and an artist. They have amazing lino cuts, and they were raised with a critical perspective. They're very blessed to have been born within a family that actually centered the importance of critical thinking. And so they're raised with a critical perspective, empathy, and a really deeply instilled passion for learning and connecting with people, including from their family, most notably their really beloved mom, Pat, and their sister, Leanne. And I also want to introduce someone who will be joining us virtually, asynchronously, okay, and this is Bobby Peltz. And Bobby Peltz is an ethnic studies teacher who's undertaken a tremendous amount of risk this past year. He's at Watsonville High School. He's the founder of 25 Books. This is a program that provides free books to kids. He earned his BA in English from UW, an MA in education from the University of San Francisco, and an MA in education leadership from San Jose University. He began his career teaching at Cupertino High School before taking a break from teaching to focus on investing and philanthropy. He has since returned to teaching, and he now enjoys both gifting books to kids in his district through the program 25 Books and educating them when they get to Watsonville High School. And he's someone whose students have routinely turned out at virtually all school board meetings. And it's really a kind of vision that I treasure, that when they go up there and they come back, Bobby is there to high five them. And so, I'm going to hand things over, and I'll just ask for you to, you maybe present in something of this order, but whatever feels right to Brazas, whatever you would like to do, and then we'll go in this order, if that sounds good. So please join me in welcoming all the guests on this roundtable.
So I can start. Oh, you want me to go up there? Oh, okay.
We need the mic for the video, so if you want to bring the mic to you.
Okay. No, that's okay. It's hard to stretch. It's okay. I can walk over. So I got involved with ethnic studies. Well, first I was really thrilled to learn that my son was going to have the opportunity to take ethnic studies. As soon as we saw it on the list, we're like, you have to take that class. And for me, it's been important for him to, and for my daughter too, to learn about this, because when I was in high school, I definitely didn't learn any of this stuff. And in fact, when I went away to college, I really thought that racism was something from like the 50s, because that's how it was taught to us. And so when I went to college, I went to Occidental College, which at that time was starting to integrate people of color. It originally was like a men's college, and then like in the 70s or 80s, they started to allow women. And then when I was there, they were starting to integrate people of color. So it was not a good time to go there. It was really difficult, and I was really unprepared because I didn't have any history. So it was really difficult to be there and not have any knowledge of racism and things like that, because like I said, it was taught to me as something that was from the 50s. So that's kind of where my interest has developed from that time, just being kind of smacked in the face with a lot of racism that I wasn't prepared to deal with. But the reason that I'm really happy to be part of the group that we're this coalition that came out of that is because I'm learning a lot, just even myself, of just what ethnic studies is, what it brings. And so one of the things that we've been doing as a group is we started the Freedom Schools. And, as Christine had mentioned, my mom was one of the strikers from that time. And I don't know how many of you know about that, but about a fourth of Watsonville was on strike, because there was the majority of the canneries there, employed about a fourth of the people in Watsonville. So because I was younger, I didn't really understand what was going on. We went, I marched with my mom, but to me it was fun. It was like a lot of people, and then, we were chanting, and then at the end of the march, we went to the park, and there was music, and to me it was fun. Like, I didn't really understand what happened, and my parents didn't sit down and tell me what happened either. And I know we struggled a lot. I know we were poor because, I couldn't get things that I wanted, where, everybody else got things that they wanted. So I knew we didn't have money, but I didn't realize, that part of it was from this. And so from the Freedom Schools, we started to learn a little bit more about like what was actually happening. So I got to see the film. And then and it was interesting to me, just as a psychologist, because I was when we started talking about presenting this in a Freedom School, I was asking my brothers and sisters who are older than me, they're about 10 years older than me, and my dad, and nobody could remember anything, which I thought was really surprising. I'm like, how do you not remember, this big thing? And, again, as a psychologist, I'm thinking because it was traumatic. We don't talk about things that are traumatic. And so, but little by little, like my dad started saying like, oh, wait, yeah, I do remember this, and I do remember that. So slowly his memory started to come back about that time in our lives. And we didn't get hit as bad as a lot of other people, because my dad didn't work in the canneries. He painted houses. And so we still had some income coming in from there. So it wasn't like other families where it was either a single mom who was on strike or both the parents were on strike. But nonetheless, now that I look back on it, and now with the information that I have, I can see where, where we were impacted by that. And then also, because at that time, going to the cannery was a step up from working in the fields, because that's where both of my parents started. They both started in the strawberry fields. Then my dad, started working painting houses, and my mom started at the cannery. And actually, at one point, my older brother also worked in the canneries. He dropped out of high school and went to work at the canneries. But so anyway, is there anything else you want me to say, or should I pass it on? Okay, so I'll pass it on.
So I want to start off by saying for basically my whole entire education, I've never learned anything about my culture or Watsonville's history. Like the only thing that was ever mentioned in school was like Cesar Chavez is like an activist. They didn't tell us of what or anything. They were just like, oh yeah, he was like speaking. And then for they also said Cinco de Mayo is something, and they didn't explain what it was or anything. They were just like, "Oh yay, let's celebrate!" So and so the freedom schools that people have been organizing, that's like the only place that I've ever been able to learn stuff about my culture and my community. And I just find it really like upsetting that the people who decide what I learn don't teach me about my community struggles, because they want me to think that America's the best country, so they can keep us thinking that if we don't succeed, it's our fault and not the systems. So yeah, that's all I really have to say. So I'll pass it on.
So as Christine said in the introduction, I grew up in east of Los Angeles in the San Gabriel Valley. Uh, Grew up around a pretty diverse group of people. I had neighbors and friends who were Filipino, had neighbors and friends who were Black. So you got to see different cultures. We'd go play at each other's houses, you know, experience the different foods and different activities. But we're also exposed to the uglier side, which is the racial divide. Why couldn't we come to an understanding about each other? You carry around the stereotypes, and you kind of figure out, like, where do they come from? Well, they come from your family as your primary teacher. They come from the community. And so as I went to school, as I got older and went to college, you kind of learn some things. Um, One of the things that I remember most vividly, one of the few things that stuck with me in college, was from a political science professor who told me, all information is biased. Everything that you get has bias. And it's up to you to think about it critically and whether that bias is helpful or harmful. And so throughout my life, my family is Democratic, typical liberals, not really involved in politics, but thinking that we're on the right side of things. And so, but contrary to popular belief, you don't always get more conservative as you get older. I've noticed that I've drifted substantially to the left as I've kind of looked at things, and realized that it's like, it's not just about race, it's not just about gender, it's about systems of power. And what do systems of power do to perpetuate themselves? One of the good, one of the primary tools of people in power is to separate us along, lines of gender, sexuality, race, and ethnicity. And so, because I was just having this discussion with the family the other day. It's like, I am more connected to and probably have more in common with a Black person or Filipino person of my own socioeconomic status than I do with a wealthy person who is, fully Mexican or Mexican American. We see the world differently. Um, so, I did want to shout out a gentleman who's not here, but who got us involved in this situation. He's a very quiet Japanese man by the name of Takashi Mizuno. And we were attending círculos at this community agency called Milpa. It primarily work with people who are incarcerated and coming out of the system or impacted by the carceral system. So my kids were participating in some groups through the program, and they have these monthly círculos, which are just kind of gatherings of people in the community to talk. And Takashi came in to the meeting that day and was talking about how the board of trustees at PVUSD had not abstained from voting to renew the contract for community responsive education, which was the agency that had helped Pajaro Valley Unified School District develop their curriculum, or not the curriculum so much as the framework for how to approach the teaching of ethnic studies. And again, it was grounded not in the struggles, not in these grandiose ideas. It was grounded in what does it look like for you and your family and for your community? What are the situations and the history of your particular community and your particular group that have affected you? And how can you use that to navigate the system and deconstruct the system? That's in a nutshell, what ethnic studies is about. Getting to the root of things, deconstructing it, and figuring out how to create better and more empowered communities. So at that talk, we were told that they had not renewed the contract. So we thought, like, why? There were these vague allegations of anti-Semitism. So Lourdes and I spent the weekend on the internet looking at stuff. And so, like I said earlier, I drifted to the left in my political thinking and my economic thinking. And so I spent a lot of the time kind of looking into, like, how do people use language? How do people, communicate, whether coded or just directly? And so when I saw, through our research, because they said Dr. Alison Tintiango Cubales is anti-Semitic. And so we were like, okay, well, that's not good. Anti-Semitism is horrible. So we looked, and as we looked, it was like, where's the anti-Semitism? Okay. And now they're pushing, these groups. Well, what is this group? What is this fair? What is this group? And I started looking, and it's like, oh my God, these are right-wing talking points. These are conservative talking points. Okay. So the picture is coming a little bit clearer. And who are these groups that are saying that Dr. Tintiango Cubales is anti-Semitic? You go, and it's like, the JDL. It's like, okay, well, they're talking about creating, conflating the Jewish people, the diaspora of Jewish people, with the state of Israel. And it's like, well, that's dumb. It's like, that's like saying, in order to be American, you have to support Donald Trump. And it's like, and there's a group of people in our country that say, if you're not a real American, if you don't support the Republican Party or whatever, it's like, no, it's all stripes, right? All shapes and sizes. So that was kind of our introduction. We went to we went to a board meeting in January, and we thought, like, oh, we can just tell them, like, what's going on, and ask them why they haven't brought it up for a vote. Why haven't they had a community discussion so that everybody kind of is talking about it. And 1 month became 9 months, and we're still in the struggle. We were just there the past week and found out that that the board, two members of the board really, two hostile members of the board, and unfortunately 4 members of the board that are not courageous enough to stand up to those people, that have made the decision to not even consider bringing community responsive education back. So we've branched out. We met some wonderful people like Dr. Hong and, Cheryl and a lot of you guys sitting in the audience today. And we decided that, we're going to keep fighting because it's bigger than just bringing CRE back. It's really about empowering the community. And Watsonville is a community, whether it was the race riots that tried to destroy the Filipino community in Watsonville in the 1930s and 40s, whether it's, the bracero programs that brought Mexican laborers in to support the war effort, but then kicked them to the curb once that need was gone. The, Proposition 187, which was horrible in California, sought to, make it illegal to speak Spanish and, have any kind of sense of being Mexican, which is the majority of the people in California. All of those things are part of ethnic studies. All of those things are the powers that be trying to dictate to the majority of the people how to live their lives. And so what I wanted to teach to my kids was, a sense of who they are. Both the struggles that they have because of their ethnicity, because of their gender, and also the privileges that they have, because I'm educated and my wife is educated, we're not, we struggle financially, but not as much as a lot of people, and to use those talents and use those skills and use their voice to stand up for people who at this moment are not able to stand up for themselves. What we want to do with this, what we're doing here, is to really bring empowerment to the people of Watsonville, to the community, to those strikers who went out on strike because they had to, because they weren't able to live on what they were being paid. We want the community of Watsonville, which is a very strong community. I mean, if you look at people individually, the family unity, the community unity, whenever there's community events Raza just shows up and we have a good time. And, I swear, I've been here since 1996, but, Lourdes was here all her life. And it's like, we can't go anywhere without her running into somebody that she knows. I haven't gotten to that level yet, but it's like everybody in Watsonville, it's like we almost know each other, right? We run into each other. We say hi. We're a strong community, but we just need to be shown how to put that strength into transforming the community into something that's livable for everyone. So that's why we're in the fight, and that's why we're going to continue to be in the fight.
All right. So yeah, I am. That is my dad. But yeah. So I am in the picture right there next to Takashi. If you remember what my dad said about him, he's the guy that introduced us. But yeah, I'm one of the lucky ones that got to take ethnic studies at PV, and I really enjoyed it. It really changed the way that I approach the world, because the way that it works, right? It's about systems of oppression and power structures, right? So the claims of anti-Semitism, right? Because that's something I found confusing, because ethnic studies is about, systems of oppressions and power. It doesn't talk about like any group is the culprit or anything. There's no blame assigned. It's just like people do what they do because they have power. And then people react to that. If they don't have the resources that they need, say they're poor, they're disenfranchised, they're going to do what they need to do to survive, right? Like right now, when we covered the Israel-Palestine war. We covered it briefly, but when we covered it, we were talking about how, you know, Hamas was doing these terrible acts of violence because Israel was encroaching on Palestinian land. I'm pretty sure if I remember correctly, Israeli settlers came in and Palestinians were somewhat okay with them because they hadn't, taken up all their land. But the more that they took the land, the more a problem it became, right? And so there was nothing anti-Semitic about that. It was just talking about how a government was oppressing, people. It was not. It's Jewish people that are doing it. It's the Israeli government, right? And so I find those claims of anti-Semitism to be unsubstantiated. And again, like my dad is talking about, it's conflating the Israeli government to just be Jewish when it's not that. And like my dad said again, that's dumb. But yeah. And so learning about these power structures, it taught me that most of the times, like 9 times out of 10, people in power don't care about us, the people that don't have power. I mean, we've been, like my dad said, we've been going to the board meetings for 9 months now, and we've just been getting flat out ignored. I mean, the last board meeting we went to, we went up to the board and we talked to them. They had a chance to right there and then to get rid of funding. I don't remember exactly what service it was, but to get rid of funding because it could be better spent on, programs for the community, and they just ignored us right there and then. After the public comments, they ignored us. And you could hear the disappointment in the community. And when something like that happens, when the board disrespects our voices, it doesn't feel good. I can tell you that much. It feels like you're devalued, like you're not respected. And so we have to look out for each other. We have to stand together because we can't rely on people in power to take the right decisions because they don't. Most of the time they don't. We know ourselves and we have to stand together. Right? We're more powerful in big numbers, and so we have to advocate for ourselves. I was part of the Student Trustee Academy, and one thing that they taught me is how a board is supposed to work and how we hold the board accountable. We were taught about the Brown Act, and what I learned as I was in that class is that our board, the PVUSD board, has been abusing their power, and it is not good. So what we've been trying to do is we've been trying to put people like Gabriel Medina, right? We've been trying to replace the people who are choosing to ignore us because we live in a democracy, right? We elect people. We put people in power there because we want them to represent us. And when they don't, we have the power to take them out. So that's one thing that's kept me going is we can't lose hope because the same way that we put them there is the same way that we can get them out of there. So hopefully we see some results when it comes to the elections in November, but I have a good feeling about the future. We just have to keep pushing stuff like this, coming together as a community. This is what keeps us going, and we just have to continue. Never lose hope and always keep going. And oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do that, but that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Joe. I'm going to be reading off of here because I don't have a printer, so bear with me, please. But I'm here to speak on behalf of a group that I'm part of called the Santa Cruz Jews for a Free Palestine, and I'm here to address the false anti-Semitism claims that were weaponized against the ethnic studies curriculum in the PVUSD. sorry, where was I? So, to deny students access to learning about their own histories due to false anti Semitism claims is to uphold white supremacy. I am currently studying to become a teacher, hopefully in the Bay Area, maybe even in this school district. And I believe that students greatly benefit from learning about colonial and white supremacist systems, both in the context of science, which I will be teaching, and otherwise. By teaching ethnic studies, we empower students to join the struggle for liberation for all. So, as far as refuting anti Semitism claims go, I'd like to first speak about my personal experience as an anti Zionist Jew of color. I grew up in New York City in a very traditional Reform Jewish household, with the exception of the fact that my mother is from the Philippines and she converted to Judaism when she married my father. The intersection of my multiple identities has given me a really deep appreciation for the Jewish diaspora and the many beautiful facets of Jewish culture that exist far beyond the reaches of Israel. There are as many different types of Jews as there are Jews on the planet, with different ethnicities, backgrounds, and traditions. Though Zionist Jewish institutions would have you believe that Israel is the anchor that holds us all together, I believe Israel's actions, in fact, stand in opposition to true Jewish values. I'll give a few examples. First, halacha, or Jewish law, teaches us this principle called pikuach nefesh. This roughly translates to saving a soul or saving a life. Pikuach nefesh actually overrides almost any other law in Judaism because the sanctity of human life is of the utmost importance always. To lose even one life is considered a tragedy, yet Israel has killed tens of thousands of Palestinians since October and many more in the 75 years of its occupation of Palestine. This is both hypocritical and goes against all true Jewish values. Tikkun olam is another integral Jewish tenet that translates roughly into repair of the world. I grew up personally in a synagogue that stressed Tikkun olam every service and every time I was there as a daily commitment to social justice and making the world a better place. It was viewed as mandatory, and it was woven into the fabric of everything that we did in the synagogue. However, the current genocide being perpetuated by the settler colonial state of Israel is antithetical to the core idea of Tikkun Olam. Judaism existed long before the modern state of Israel and will exist long after. I'm here to affirm that anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism, and to teach the truth and the history of the occupation is not anti-Semitism. In fact, I wish I had learned more about the history of Palestine in my educational career. Why did I learn about the Holocaust many, many times over, but never even heard the word Nakba until I sought out that education myself? The Nakba, which translates to the catastrophe, refers to the ethnic cleansing and violent displacement of the Palestinian people from their homeland. Many people believe the Nakba to be a singular event that occurred in 1948, where 750,000 people were violently expelled from their homes and killed. Yet the Nakba is actually still ongoing, as hundreds of thousands more Palestinians have been forced from their homes, killed, or imprisoned in the last 75 years. Now we are witnessing the most recent catastrophe, as it is basically live streamed to us on social media straight from Gaza. And even so, censorship of education is rampant in this country and across the world, and students are denied access to critical information. It is shocking to me that I never learned this in my Jewish education or any of my educational settings. It is imperative to understand that all forms of oppression are connected through the forces of white supremacy and capitalism. The weaponization of the Jewish faith to commit violence against another group is unconscionable, and no one is free until we are all free. I would like to read a segment from the letter that our group, Santa Cruz Jews for a Free Palestine, wrote to the PVUSD school board, expressing our support for renewing the contract with community responsive education. As Jews, we want to challenge the accusations of anti-Semitism that led to the suspension of the initial contract. In addition to refuting the claims of anti-Semitism, we strongly affirm the importance of ethnic studies. We assert that Jewishness is just one of many ethnicities that deserve critical attention and examination in classrooms, and that Jewish histories of oppression should be taught in discussion with the oppression of other peoples. It's also worth explicitly stating that Jewishness itself is not homogeneous. Jews come from different national, racial, cultural, linguistic, and political backgrounds. In putting histories of diverse experiences in conversation, we deepen our knowledge and arrive at a more compassionate understanding of one another. In fact, Jewish values of education demand this of us, which rabbis Dev Noily and Hazan Shulamit Weiss-Fairman articulated in the following quote. Quote, Torah teaches us to draw on our past experiences of oppression and violence to open our hearts to everyone who experiences injustice. We believe our future as a community depends on our ability to do this, and supporting the overall ethnic studies model curriculum draft is a powerful way to practice this spiritual and moral imperative. We echo their call with our own here. We are asking for the histories of Jewish oppression to be taught in tandem with other histories of persecution, including that of the Palestinian people. On this point, we object to false allegations that teaching the accurate history about the Israeli occupation of Palestine is anti-Semitic. Perpetuating this myth makes genuine anti-Semitism much more difficult to identify and confront, and more urgently, fuels deadly anti-Palestinian racism and Islamophobia here and everywhere. While it is, of course, anti-Semitic to equate the actions of Israel to Judaism as a whole, failing to teach students the reality of what is taking place furthers ignorance and will only contribute to anti-Semitism, Palestinian erasure, and Islamophobia. Modern Jewish history will forever be marked by what Israel has committed towards Palestine, especially if we do not teach the events honestly and critically in classrooms. The history of what has taken place in Palestine for the better part of the last century, in line with all histories of oppression, must be taught and attended to in a K-12 curriculum. Signed, the Santa Cruz Jews for a Free Palestine. We had approximately 70 local Jews sign on to this letter. Zionist Jewish institutions will call folks like me a fake Jew or a self-hating Jew, but I stand before you today as a proud New York City Jew who stands against colonialism, white supremacy, oppression, and genocide. Ethnic studies is essential for helping students understand their histories, understand that all struggles are connected, including our struggles, and build power against oppressive systems. Thank you.
Thank you to y'all. Y'all are incredible. And I wanted to say that I'm by no means an expert on this topic. Christine asked me to kind of turn this ethnic studies struggle into a lesson plan. And so I'm going to show y'all what I had prepared. I don't have in-classroom experience. I've only done like community teach-ins. So I don't have to ask questions with the same type of limitations that in-classroom teachers do have, so keep that in mind. But just to give a little bit of context, we're going to be talking about Bobby Pels, who Christine mentioned earlier. Yesterday, during the Three Musketeers panel, they talked about the significance of having their teacher, Mr. Morgan, who really gave them a critical perspective to be able to understand the politics of the world around them. And so that's why we really wanted to highlight Bobby Pels, who's doing that same work as an ethnic studies teacher at Watsonville High. Bobby he's going into his 7th year of teaching at Watsonville High, 6 of which he has integrated ethnic studies into his English curriculum. The Ethnic Studies program, taught through history, art, and English, was developed by former Assistant Superintendent Lisa Aguirre. And after a long project without success, she recruited a team of 4 teachers, including Bobby Pels, Bridget Phantom, Brogan Dahl, and Kristen Erickson, who helped develop the original curriculum. Bobby said, I had a graffiti banner that said, "Be a revolutionary," and Angela Davis posters on my wall, so the teachers recommended me, of course, the whitest guy, to teach ethnic studies. But it was true, because I've always wanted to be a teacher for social justice. So the board members were initially supportive of ethnic studies, and they actually developed a committee in order to form a training for these ethnic studies teachers because none of them had real degrees or formal trainings in ethnic studies. All of them were white. So they carefully selected through the different options of contractors, and they chose community responsive education led by ethnic studies expert Dr. Allison Tintiango Kubales. So this was all part of their process that they chose CRE and Dr. Allison. And 3 years into their program, which was when they were supposed to actually complete the training of the teachers and also of the school board and administration, they decided to cut this program. And so CRE and all the work that they had done was basically rendered useless and not implementable. And so all of the ethnic studies training that teachers like Bobby took part in developing, but also were taking for themselves, they can't keep going using the CRE model, which is very harmful and undermines all of the work that they had been doing for the past several years. Yes. So, yeah. So Bobby took part in the development of the CRE Ethnic Studies program since it began developing at PV. And since September, when it was revoked due to the testimonies of Gil Stein and Roz, despite his voice not being considered or valued as an ethnic studies teacher, he's been at every single board meeting, mobilizing and uplifting community members and students to demand that they bring back the CRE program. And especially he's taught about the public comments in his classroom, facilitating these discussions with students to help bring them in and build up their confidence in order to actually give public comment at these meetings. And just how he views CRE, he said, CRE is just an organization that works with the community. They don't have a prescribed agenda. They work together based on the needs and desires of the community. The whole point is to come in and help the community respond to its own history and to build a curriculum around that. So we're gonna watch a public comment that he gave, in February of this year.
Good evening, Bobby Pell, Watsonville High. I'm here once again to speak on the CRE contract. Recently, I asked my students how it made them feel that you have not renewed the contract, and tonight I'd like to use my time to amplify their words. Amelia said, the board always preaches that PVUSD cares and that student voices are always heard. However, there are multiple instances, and this situation especially, that make ethnic studies students feel unheard. Elizabeth said, I feel that before deciding not to bring back the CRE contract, the school board should come to our classes and see what is really taught and not just assume. Mariana said, some families may think that taking this class is harmful to students, but they're wrong. Instead, this class will motivate and encourage you to do better. Angela said, it is without a doubt one of the most interesting and informative classes I've ever taken. Jasmine said, as a student, the only time I have ever felt proud of my background and my culture was once I began learning ethnic studies. Damien said, this class has changed my perspective in every way and allowed me to find a reason to find an education more than just high school. Julie said, this class has definitely impacted me to become a leader in my community because it's actions like this that force us, the students, to use our voices for better representation. Renee asked, if the entire program can be cut off when a small group of people do not like it, then why can't it be renewed when the students themselves, the people who teach it, and the creators of the program are asking for it to be brought back? Beatrice says, it is us who want this, and I thought it was us you're supposed to listen to. Alejandro said, this just goes to show how people at the top of the education system do not pay attention to the teachers' and students' feelings. And Miguel summed it up best when he said they need to be taught about ethnic studies more than we do. I could not have said it any better. Bring the contract back. Thank you.
And then there's Takashi. So yeah, that is one public comment that Bobby gave that I think is especially teachable. And I wanted to pose this question to the group. Based on the student testimonies that Bobby shared in his speech and also that you've heard from Ishel and Max, I'm wondering, how would you define ethnic studies?
was looking at it as a toolbox to go further into analyzing structures that make up the place that we live in movie.
A toolbox.
Or an ethnic background.
Okay, awesome. Tools for understanding the world around us. Anyone else? Cheryl?
Tool that's transformation.
Yes, yes. I saw a hand over there. Yes, Omar.
Says based on students' testimony, some define ethnic studies, and I think Guillermo and his sister are a great example of what ethnic studies is all about.
Yeah. That's incredible. Yeah. One definition of ethnic studies among the amazing ones that we've heard today that really has always struck me is that ethnic studies is the interrogation of systems of power from the perspective of the communities most affected, right? From our own Christine. And I think in this public comment, Bobby really exemplified and embodied ethnic studies by yielding his own public comment time to the voices of his students who were the most impacted. And so kind of going further into how this could kind of be taught, I wanted to pose a few discussion questions. Actually, before that, I wanted to go over the ethnic studies kind of model that CRE positioned for Watsonville and PV. So this is what they call the fields framework. Freedom, identity, empathy, literacy, dreams, and solidarity. And so I'm just gonna go, actually, can we popcorn reading this perhaps? Anybody wanna start with freedom? Thank you, Christine. All of these create an acronym called FIELDS, which is the framework. These are the key tenets of ethnic studies through which teachers were trained to teach, specifically regarding to ethnic studies in Watsonville and PV.
Can I add to that Dr. used this to honor the community of Watsonville because a lot of our people do work in the field, so that's why that was created.
Her husband
Yes.
was raised in Watsonville by agricultural workers. So
Yes.
she has that connection to Watsonville.
Okay, I can repeat what was just said. Alison Cantiango Cubales, again, as Bobby stated and Keiko quoted from Bobby, Allison worked with people locally to develop a curriculum that was responsive to the local area. And not only was her husband the child of migrant farm workers who grew up locally, but also she, in speaking to people and teachers and administrators in the community, understood that, okay, the agricultural fields have historically been a site of immense exploitation. And so how do you take something that is a site of economic, racial, social exploitation and transform it into a field of study that centers community empowerment? And that was the idea behind community responsive education. And so this is what she arrived at, and Omar is going to read F.
Freedom, Catering Pajaro Valley, ESP, Voices of Indigenous People and Communities of Color and their fight for freedom. Students and teachers to study and value stories, cultures, social movements, voices of Indigenous / POC.
Thank you.
Is there an I? An I. Okay.
Identity, living freely to be and transform one's identity while respecting the freedom of all relations, creating a safe space for students to learn about their identities and express themselves.
Thank you, Willow. And E.
E is for empathy. Students will feel connections to all relations, especially those more vulnerable than themselves, and exercise personal and social responsibility towards ending racism and intersectional forms of oppression.
Thank you, Nat. Is there an L? Oh, yeah, thank you.
Literacy, grow multiple literacies that support their openness to read text from authors of color, developing a critical lens to examine the world that impacts the experiences of people of color and themselves, connecting the materials to living in Pajaro Valley.
Thank you so much. How about a D? Anyone have? Oh, thank you.
Dreams. Students will dream, hope, and take action to build a world where they're alongside their families, teachers, and communities. Humanity and well-being and joy is the center of learning.
And an S. Anyone want to do the S? Oh, sorry. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Christine.
Solidarity. Students become leaders and community members who use their power and solidarity with ethnic studies groups to create positive change and imagine new humanizing systems to support the actualization of all people in Pajaro Valley and beyond.
Thank you to everyone for reading that. And yeah, again, as Lourdes said, these tenets of ethnic studies form the acronym FIELDS in order to give honor to the farm working families of Pajaro Valley. And I think as we kind of look through these, you can really understand what ethnic studies starts to look like when put into action or into practice in a very intentional way, right? Honoring the indigenous people of Pajaro Valley and of Watsonville, creating a social responsibility toward ending racism and all intersectional forms of oppression, and actually creating systems to support the actualization of all people in Pajaro Valley and beyond. So with these key tenets, you also understand why ethnic studies is under attack, because they don't want us to have these things. They don't want us to ever rise up from these exploitative working class conditions, to end racism, to end oppression. And so behind all of these things, this is a problematic, ethnic studies is a problematic curriculum and a problematic field to be in, because it's opposite to all of the systems of oppression that shape our educational system. So these are some questions that I posed as kind of lessons. Understanding these definitions of ethnic studies, why did the school board revoke the CRE contract? Thinking about the experiences that these students shared, as educators and organizers, what approaches can we take to put into practice an ethnic studies model of centering and transforming our communities to build leadership and agency? And of course, how is anti-Semitism used as a narrative weapon for political control in this current political landscape? And to also give honor to the TWLFers who are here today, understanding that these words in a proper ethnic studies curriculum would also not say ethnic studies. It would say something more along the lines of third world studies, or even something that is more adapted to the contemporary conditions to encapsulate the true value of ethnic studies of the Third World Liberation Front. We were gonna watch another public comment video, but I don't think we have time. Okay, awesome. Well, I just have to find it.
And if people want to think about those questions.
Here we go. Heads in takeoff mode.
Sorry. Okay, let's see. Here we go. Oh, awesome. Wait.
I also want to remind Trustee Olivia who is further disregarding our concerns, that my brother and his friends will be old enough to vote by the time of the re-election. Please add this back to the agenda and actually represent your constituents. Thank you.
Good evening. Bob Charles, Watsonville High. I'm here once again to speak on the CRE contract. Vice President Soto The night that this board decided not to renew the CRE contract, you made a motion to approve it. You said, and I quote, "We have a viable program that's already been in place, and I don't feel that we need to disrupt it because of an opinion." And yet, here we are. We are here mostly because of the opinions of President Acosta and President Serpa. Opinions they formed without speaking to Allison themselves. Opinions they formed without talking to the teachers that actually worked with Allison. Opinions they formed without sitting in and on CRE PD sessions. Opinions they formed without observing an ethnic studies class in session. And opinions they formed without asking the students we serve what their experiences have been. That tells me that these opinions are just that, opinions. And they should not disrupt the progress of a viable program. And yet, here we are. In the meantime, folks have written and spoken up in support of Allison and CRE as a viable program. Myself and the ethnic studies teachers of your own district have supported CRE as a viable program. Experts and professors from UCSC have supported CRE as a viable program. Over 1,700 people and 65 organizations have supported CRE as a viable program. Students who have taken ethnic studies and their parents have supported CRE as a viable program. When you have this many professionals and experts saying the same thing, it's not an opinion, it's a fact. CRE is a viable program. And yet, here we are. Vice President Soto, it's been 6 months since you said those words. This has gone on long enough. Right this wrong. Bring the CRE contract back. Thank you.
Right. So Bobby lays out all of these reasons why it was a viable program, including the fact that board members who had previously supported it when the decision was coming around to renew the contract or not, who had changed their minds. And now that, at this time in February, it had been 6 months, but now it's going on 9 months and the struggle is still continuing. And so here are some questions in this video that you could potentially kind of use. So based on Bobby's testimonies and giving context, what systems of power are exercised by the school board? What gives them the authority to make these decisions against the majority? What are the sites and grounds on which the struggles for ethnic studies are fought within and against power imbalances? For months on end, the community of Pajaro Valley has spoken up against the board's revoking of the CRE contract, mobilizing to continuously confront their representatives. So how do we see the school board meetings as an arena of uneven power? And we can even think back to Eli's brilliantly mapped together of these analysis and dissections of these school board members and their financial ties that are influencing these decisions and allowing them to make the decisions for the majority, even though it's wrong. What specific strategies, words, framing, repetitions does Bobby use to expose the hypocrisies of the school board? And what context does he add that may be often overlooked or left out about the contract ending? And then finally, what do these demonstrations of undemocratic power reveal about the broader political context of ethnic studies or about, American democracy that we're operating within this country? Whose voices are the board members following and acting according to, and why? Which Eli already told us. And yeah, we wanted to highlight this photo, especially because you can see that these students have already answered these questions. They've already identified who these figures of power are and called it out, and yet it's still not valued in terms of being able to make any decision making, any actual inclusion into formulating their curriculum as ethnic studies is supposed to be formulated by students. And Bobby actually shared that they had a meeting with a new committee who's supposed to decide, where the future of ethnic studies in PVUSD goes from here on out. No board members were there, no students were invited, no community members were invited. And so that shows that this shows in all these little committees as well, how these power dynamics through exclusion play out. And then some activities would be cool. Write your own public comment statement for the students. What would you say to advocate for ethnic studies? And then also, what does ethnic studies mean to you? What does community power mean to you? In an open expression, you could do a collage, you could do power mapping, poetry, music. These open expression kinds of activities or assignments are really helpful for students who might not have all the traditional skills, or who just want to visualize things in an imaginative way so that we can actually understand what community power means. Something that I thought of during the earlier session was also like kind of what you were talking about with círculos, like having these oral history exchanges within the classroom where students are allowed to bring their own stories in and be valued as sources of knowledge. And then finally, I wanted to just end with some quotes from Bobby. He said, if you've set up an environment where teachers are afraid to teach something, then you've made it political, right? Education is inherently political. What you can and can't say in the classroom is political. I have no fear. I'm going for it. And then, yeah, I just wanted to open up to ask, like, if anybody who's involved with PVUSD and the struggle for ethnic studies, if there's anything that you guys would want to add to this lesson plan, any questions you guys would want to ask, or anything, I don't know, anything you would want to add since we're nearing the end of this session.
I guess the only thing I would add is that if there are any ideas on how to motivate the average person to come out, because history shows us that the people that are in power are very few. They have a lot of resources, and they use those resources to engender apathy or comfort. People who are comfortable or people who don't think that their voice matters are the ones they stay home. And so, I've always said people power always beats the power of money, but people power is a lot harder to marshal. It's a lot harder to get together and to keep in solidarity. So anything that anyone can add, would be good for us we're still organizing.
Would you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, my name is Shirley Flores Munoz. I'm a teacher with Cabrillo College, but it's been on my website for what, a year and a half now, and I'm just barely crawling out. Okay, but I came to your 2 meetings, and it's a hot item. I'm going to be there for you, ready to write the letter. But you need some backup, baby. Cabrillo College is a very strong ethnic studies program. We've got a director. She's great. Full-time tenured position in ethnic studies, which includes the directorship as well as other courses she's teaching. And we're developing the program. You need to bring them in. Okay, Enrique Buelna, Victoria Banales, the director of ethnic studies, I never remember her name, but all those people who are affiliated with ethnic studies at Cabrillo College, they need to be sitting with you. And we need to be at those board meetings. Those people, okay, I was asleep. Roy Riccio said, go to this board meeting, go to the board meeting. Okay, so what's problematic for me is clarity. I was unclear. What's going down over there, right? Did they fire somebody? Which was it? Pajaro School, Watsonville High School? Lots of confusion. So clarify the mission statement. And now I'm getting this and I'm here and I just feel so saturated and so much love. So thank you so much. And this familia, love them, because I've seen them in action.
I'm Sean. I used to teach in Santa Cruz City Schools and have been working with this group for a few years now. And one thing that generally strikes me with organizing is, and how you get the average person is, under these, like, the capitalism that we live under, people don't have time to organize, right? We are working all the time. we're trying to meet the basic needs of our family members, our family unit. And so how do you provide space and time or ease some of those pressures so that people have the space and time to come out and organize? And so when I worked in Monterey County, a lot of what we did was, are you feeding people? Do you have childcare? Do you have spaces that are easily accessible to people who are maybe not using cars to get around or things like that? And you just like, not your job, right? This is like a broader coalitional thing of like, but how do we give people the time to organize under the structures that we live in?
Thank you. Yeah, we always feed people. We believe in feeding people. Yes. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, my name is Ruby Vasquez. I'm born and raised in Watsonville. I'm also a veteran educator at PVUSD. And currently what I do is, teach on special assignment, and it's family engagement. So I agree with what was just said. And then also, like, how is this message being put out in Spanish? This is also surely my first time coming to gather more information. And so I appreciate everybody's input, that the stories that you've all shared and the information has been really helpful for me. But I think, there are maybe, putting heads together to think of some of the organizations that are out there. And I'm thinking of just like even like artistic organizations that have been in our community, that may not typically take like a political stand on things, but knowing folks, I think this would be very important. I don't know, I'm just trying to think of how to utilize some of the other groups that are out there that folks maybe already have that confianza with, and that seeing their name, might entice them to come and listen. And yeah, just putting a lot of this that was put out today in Spanish, or in hiring interpreters, I think are, a way of getting folks, the average person. But it's hard in anything that we do in education, trying to get the average parent, especially Spanish speaking or indigenous speaking, to come to the sessions. It's difficult, but those who do come, you typically have a supporter. So yeah.
Yes. And we can open this up more generally to a conversation as well. Questions that you have?
Hi, I'm Jenny Dowd. I teach ethnic studies through art and at PV High School. And I just finished my first year there. So I find it ironic that they have now asked me to teach more ethnic studies, because it's a graduation requirement now. I don't know if you knew that, but it's a new graduation requirement. So organizing. And so much has been touched to me today, because I'm a Jewish New Yorker, and I grew up in a Marxist family, so it was anti-Zionism, and I was taught through the Workers of the World Unite, so dare to struggle, dare to fight. And also here in Watsonville, I've been teaching in PV for 35 years, so I wonder how to bring UCSC people in here, to the academic UCSC and student support, the Cabrillo academics, students and support, and have the meeting in Watsonville. Have the meeting in Watsonville, have it in Spanish. I used to want to turn Pajaro Middle School into a community school when I taught at Ohlone for 24 years. Make it where the parents can just walk to the meeting, not have to drive to the meeting, have it easy to get there. And also, I'm only here right now because I'm on vacation. So when I'm teaching, I don't get out of my classroom sometimes till 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night. And then maybe go to a board meeting. Oh, yeah. So how to make it easy to participate. I have hope right now. I have hope right now because of the flip in the presidential election. I have hope because of the people coming to be the new admin at PV High. I have hope in all of you, that you showed up, all of you today. And I have hope in our students. They love learning about who they are. They love it that it's reflected in the walls in my room, all over the room. You know, there's Native Americans, there's Cesar Chavez, there's Dolores, there's Alvin Ailey, Judith Jamison, there's figures of color all over the room. And si se puede.
Thank you, Jenny. I'm sorry, I have to say one more thing because we are on the cusp here. Never underestimate the force that we're going against in this moment of time. We are in a strange moment right now. 2047, right up there. And we will be the numerical majority of the United States of America. You don't think that they don't know we're coming? They do know. And education is frontline defense, frontline offensive. Education is where it's at. So Cabrillo College, we just lost one. We tried to change our name. 3 years of study, 3 years of proposals, 3 years of testimony and professors and whatnot. $1 million was offered to Cabrillo College not to change its name after $500,000. But you know what got them in the end? They said, we're going to take your board seat. You change the name, you vote for that, we're going to run against you and change your board seat. I said to myself, vote for the name change. They're going to take your board seat anyway, you know? And what are you there for if you're not to vote for the name change? What are you waiting for? So I just want to say, don't put yourselves down. You're doing everything that can be done. But the forces that are against us right now are great. And this is a historical moment. And you are riding that historical train. Love it. Okay? Okay.
Thank you.
Omar Barrios Nidos, activist, machista, brown beret. Uh, I'm like, again, I think the students are the answer, empowering them, teaching them how to go about this. But from my experience, what needs to happen to bring the people in is networking, like you said, with the universities, you know, building a parent club. A parent club. We used to have a migrant club, a migrant parents club that would sit, that was part of the school that would make sure that our voices were being heard, you know, and when there was injustices, they would step in. Also, bringing in lawyers to hold the board accountable for some of their actions, to start putting those lawsuits in there to let them know that we mean business, you know. But you know, in organizing and sometimes you have to have the protests. Sometimes you have to let your voice heard, you know, because we've been to the school board. I haven't been to as many school board meetings as you have, but from what I've seen, they're not listening. And when they're not listening, that's when people start getting loud and they have to organize. You know, hey, you guys need to start listening to the community that you guys work for, you know, and making noise, from my experience, gets things done. And when there's leaders in the community, those leaders have to accept the fact that when you make noise, you're going to be on the chopping block. And when I was doing it, I was willing to put my neck out there, you know, for my people. So we need to find leaders and encourage them to step out.
It's like what Omar and Shirley are just saying. It's like, yeah, you may be catapulted into a position of power, but do you choose to align yourself with the power, unjust power of a few over the vast majority, or do you stand with the people? And it's a very real question. And I wanted to just say, I mean, first of all, this was an utterly amazing roundtable. I'm always heartened. I mean, this is the thing. It's like, you know, it's so demoralizing and so incredibly, it's so disrespectful of the board to ignore people who are repeatedly speaking out and not to take any kind of movement forward. At the same time, having had the extraordinary privilege of organizing alongside this group of people, and look at this incredible, like, to teach the struggle. We in ethnic studies, we teach the struggle. We learn from those who came before. We learn from what's happening now, and we don't define the limits of that knowledge as being the walls of the classroom. We are praxis and orientation, so we organize for change. And I wanted to say a few things from the session that Alfonso was leading earlier today. And among some of the things that we were saying was, and one thing that we're going to be doing tomorrow is a number of local organizations. We are coming together, and you saw that Keiko just created a just stunning curriculum. And we are all going to contribute from our organizing spaces. And from that, we are going to co-construct an ethnic studies social movements class that I think we should teach everywhere. Let's democratize the teaching process, and we'll all be teaching it in different spaces, organizational, formal sites of education, what have you. Let's create the materials. The other thing too is we talked about this. So I love the idea of a parents club. And like, how could we foster that? How should some of the resources of the district be directed toward that? And maybe there should be an after-school students club around ethnic studies too. Like, grassroots organizing practices, learning from other struggles. And then we also wanted to follow up by doing education around a series of exceedingly hostile legislative bills against ethnic studies. So please do stay tuned. You're being here. We will be in touch with you. Okay, and then that might be over Zoom. That might be in person. We also were thinking, like, we have to organize in terms of unions. And if it's not the teachers union, thinking about classified workers. And so what kind of headway can we make? But we've got to get organized. And instead of always like banging our head against the wall at these, school board meetings, we have started our own freedom school in the tradition of freedom and liberation schools. When there is an area like Watsonville, which is a carceral geography that tilts toward the prison system as a supposed solution to structural problems, how should education always be in the service of freedom freedom for the greatest possible collective? And so we've started our own freedom school. We invite you to come and organize with us. And we've taken in your feedback, and where we misstep, we as a community should actually self-critique and self-correct, right? And we talked about a number of other things too, but I think that let's continue the conversation. Let's rejoin everything tomorrow. And I just wanted to say, I'll just say it here, just thank you everyone so much for all that you've been doing. And there are people who are in the audience too who've been ceaselessly organizing. And, a movement moves people in multiple ways. And I am so deeply moved by all of you. Just thank you so much. See you tomorrow, everyone.